Hi, one and all. So in this video, I am going to start production function. This is the third chapter of microeconomics, production and cost. So in that chapter, I am going to deal with production function. You already know what is production. In the last video, we discussed in detail about production. So in this video, it is a new concept, that is production function. What is production function? Production function means production is depend upon something else. What is that something else? Production is depend upon what? Production is depend upon inputs or factors of production. Remember, inputs and factors of production both are same. You can use any words. Factors of production and inputs both are same. Okay, both gives same meaning. So here I told you that production is depend upon inputs used in that process. Production is depend upon inputs, the level of inputs, the amount of inputs that a firm is using in that production process. Okay, here what is production function? Relationship between inputs used and output produced by the firm. If a firm is using inputs, which means that firm will produce output. Why it is producing output? Because it is using inputs. You already know what are inputs and what is output. In the last video, we discussed in detail about inputs and output. Here, function means inputs, relationship between inputs and output. Okay, let me say a farmer decides to produce wheat, bodhi. Okay, take for example, with this example I will make you understand very clearly. Farmer decides to produce wheat. Okay, wheat andra ಗೋಧಿ. In order to produce wheat, what inputs are required? What factors are required to produce wheat? That is known as inputs. Okay, in the last video we discussed. Farmer decides to produce wheat. This is known as output. In order to produce wheat, what inputs are required? You can make a list, you can prepare a list that inputs, what are inputs, what inputs are required to produce that wheat, that is output. First of all, we need land, that farmer needs land, labor, water, electricity, fertilizers. You can add some other inputs as well. These are the most important inputs used in the production of wheat. And now, production function means the relationship between this wheat, that is output, and inputs. This output, the level of output in the production, the level of output is depend upon the level of the use of these inputs. If the use of inputs are increased, land, labor, water, electricity, fertilizers, if the amount of these inputs are increased, then output will also increase. Is it? If the amount of land is increased, the production of wheat will increase. And labor, if labor increases and land increases and the amount of water increases, the amount of electricity increases, the amount of fertilizers as per requirement it is increases, then the production, the output level will also increase. which means simply what production function refer to is the relationship between these inputs and this output. That is the relationship. What is the, so here this output wheat, the production of wheat is completely depend upon the level of inputs used. Okay, so this is the relationship between both, inputs are not depend upon output. This output is depend upon input. Okay, symbolically we can write like this. So output symbolically I will show Q. Q is output, that is wheat. So here I can't write all these inputs. I will take only two important or major inputs. What are the major inputs? I will take land. So land I will show K, and labor I will symbolically show L. If you want to add these things, you can add. In your book they have given K. K means land and L means labor. You can add this electricity and water, but these are not as important as land and labor. Without water, production is impossible. But compared to these things, these inputs, these two inputs are very important. These are the major inputs. That's why I took only these two inputs I took here. So here the level of the production of wheat, that is output, symbolically I shown Q. This production is depend upon K and L, that is the function, which means that shows dependence of Q. Q is the result of K and L. As the result of K and L, production of wheat possible. By making use of land and labor, don't get confused with that. Here land is L and labor is also L. So both are same alphabets. So that's why I use a different one, that is K. Okay, don't get confused. K means land here and L means labor here. So I can't write all the inputs here. I took only major inputs, that is K and L, that is land and labor, and I am explaining it. So this is production function. This production function is showing the relationship between output, that is Q, and input. What is the relationship? This Q, that is output, is depend upon, F means dependence. F is showing the dependence of Q is what? K and L. Q is depend upon K and L. Okay, if the amount of K increases, K and L increases. If the amount of K and L increases, which means land and labor increases, production or output will also increase. Here, if only land increases, labor not increases, that means production will not increase. In order to increase the level of production, at least one factor or one input should be increased. If you want to increase the level of output, there has to be increase in the inputs. Inputs should be increased. In order to produce more output, inputs should be increased. So here, in order to increase wheat, the production of wheat, amount of land should be increased, amount of labor should be increased. If we don't increase the amount of land and labor, output will not increase. So I gave a table right there, you can see very clearly. So in your textbook they have given a table. That is very confusing for you. So I simplified that table. So you can see very clearly. I will explain how that production. So remember, production function is the it will show the relationship between Q and KL. That means output and input. Here Q will change if inputs are changed. Q is dependent variable. Why it is variable? Because it will change. It will change. So that's why I written variable. It is a dependent variable. Why it is dependent variable? Because the output will depend upon inputs. And K and L are independent variables. They are not depend upon anything. They are not depend upon Q. They are not depend upon output. They are independent variable. Okay. The relationship between both these output and input is known as production function. Okay. So if in order to increase the level of output, inputs, the amount of inputs should be increased, and that is K and L, water, electricity should be increased in order to increase the production of output. Okay, so here in order to increase the production, both inputs should be increased. So I can see a table right here. In order to increase the production of wheat, if land is 0, labor is 0, the production will be 0. There will be no production. If there is no labor, 1 acre of land is there. 1 acre of land is there. There is no labor. Then production must be 0, because there is no one is there to work in the field. How can output should be produced? How to produce output? So production should be 0. And labor, 1 labor is there, but land is not there. Then production should be 0. There will be no production, because there is no land. What is the use of labor without land? Then land is available, 1 unit of land is available, and 1 unit of labor is available. Then production of wheat is possible. That is 2 units of production is happened as a result of 1 unit of labor and 1 unit of land. And then in order to increase the production, land and labor should be increased. So land increased to 2 units and labor increased to 2 units, and production increased. And in order to increase the level of production, both should be increased, and land and labor should be increased. Here land is 1 acre and labor is 3. So here production is increased, and here also production is increased. So this table is showing that the level of output is depend upon the amount of inputs used in the production process. So that is what production function is. It is very simple to understand. Production function is the relationship between output and inputs. How much of inputs are used to produce output? So clearly you can see relationship between inputs used and amount of inputs used, and amount of output produced. Okay, so the important segment right here is this is symbolically this I shown like this. Okay, so this particular thing is called as production function. Okay, Q, this is the output, symbolically I shown Q is the output, and these things are inputs. Inputs are not depend upon output. Output is depend upon inputs. So that's why Q is dependent variable. Q is depend upon inputs, and the output is depend upon input. And K and L, these are the inputs, and they are not depend upon anything else. So they are independent variable. Q is dependent variable. So in the next video I will start isocons. Thank you.